The end of A Dance with Dragons set a relaxed, if ominous, tone, culminating in a death that was quite sudden. You might have expected a death, given the apparent pattern of epilogues and prologues, but not only was the murderous moment masterful, it brought back a favorite who had been missing. One of the most interesting, exciting, mysterious, and dangerous and dynamic characters whose presence was a huge part of the early books we're talking about. He came back to kill 2 members of the small council in one room in one evening, pretty easily, with children doing much of the work. I mean, you know you've been outplayed when children are your downfall. A man who himself used to be on the council, by the way. His return itself should be perhaps the biggest news of all. The matter most urgently in need of a response. This man has access to everyone in the castle via his knowledge of the secrets of the Red Keep, meaning the tunnels. Secrets he has been learning and hoarding for his long game of thrones, now in its final phase. Aegon is here. He's landed. Conquest 2.0, sort of. It's time to emerge from the shadows and pave the way for his candidate in darkly effective ways, like assassination, a masterstroke, the killing of an enemy leader in a manner that causes his own allies to turn on each other. It's so perfect. Varys is just one of the best written characters, in my opinion, because super smart characters are among the hardest to write. I mean, how do you convincingly write someone that outsmarts everybody? How do you convincingly craft a character who comes off as capable of running circles around the rest through cunning? One of the many twists here is that no one knows this but us. Well, and Varys. It's a whodunit to Cersei, Mace Tyrell, and so many others in the Red Keep, and eventually elsewhere once news spreads. One that will have them at each other's throats in some cases. Meanwhile, we know who it was, yet nobody suspects the spider. They probably should. Maybe they will eventually, but it's not there yet. I don't think, and it might not be there yet ever. There yet ever? Well, anyway. We've got parallels to Ned's execution, Jon's assassination, theories on what Varys expects from all this, as in what this pull of the trigger will trigger, and what else he'll do to follow it up. I mean, who thinks Varys is going to stop at just 2 murders, right? I don't. You don't either, probably. No, indeed. Varys is unleashed now. So we've got a lot of discussion in that regard to come. All that and more on this episode of History of Westeros podcast. Hello and welcome, everybody. It's another fine Sunday where we are talking about the last thing that happens in the published material that we have. Yes, we've got a few TWOW chapters. In fact, we'll briefly refer to the Mercy chapter in this one because it does give us a clue to what's happened after this. Only a little clue, but definitely a little bit's there. But mostly, yeah, it's the last event of the books, the reemergence of Varys, and it's just really cool. All the theories about him. We've talked about this chapter before, of course. With Kevin, we did a scripted episode just about this chapter, but it wasn't about the focus on Varys. It wasn't about what he expects, the coming engineered disputes between Tyrell and Lannister, which Varys, doesn't have to do a whole lot to make that happen, but he sure is going to push it. Because, Cersei and the Tyrells already don't like each other that much. So we're here most Sundays at 3 p.m. Eastern doing live streams. You can find our episodes afterwards anytime on YouTube, but if you check on Spotify or on any other podcast platform, you can find the edited versions of these episodes. A little cleaned up, slightly shorter, a few mistakes ironed out, things like that. They're not hugely different, but they definitely sound better, and the quality is, it's worth it. So check that out if you prefer. And if you listen on Patreon, though, it's ad-free. You got to pay to sign up for that. But we give you other benefits, things to make it worthwhile, extra episodes, stuff like that. Shout out to our good friend Nina Krusling. goodqueenally.tumblr.com is where you can find her blog. And the latest post over there is a question about the Green Grace and the marriage to Hisdar. Why did she push it? What's her agenda? What's her connection to the Harpy? You'll want to read that, once again, over at goodqueenally.tumblr.com. That's one L in alley, like Queen Alysanne. You can hit us up with questions, either live during the episode, or if you're catching it afterwards on one of those other platforms, or not live, just hit us up at westeroshistory@gmail.com, or on Blue Sky, or any other way that you can find us, like our Facebook group or Discord. Yeah, there's lots of ways to reach us. Trivia question to get us started. At the end of the episode, I will give you the answer. Who, in the Kevan epilogue, twice responds to the mention of John Connington with something like, if it is Connington? Yeah. Answer at the end, like I said, and during the episode, I will give the clues. In case you don't recall, if you're listening closely, you'll get the answer through context and subtlety. Now, I do love an alliterative title, The Killing of Kevan, but this was really more properly an assassination. It had a political motive. It wasn't personal. And though while we shouldn't believe everything Varys says, he flat out says this. And it is believable in this case. Why would Varys have a major problem with Kevan specifically? And why would he not tell him that as he's killing him? If he wanted revenge and wanted him to be like gloating, like, I got you, why wouldn't he say that? So yeah, I think we can believe Varys on this at least. Maybe not everything he says. Well, definitely not on everything he says. But this one, yeah. And what makes this chapter particularly interesting, among many other things, is that Kevan has a lot of insights on other people. He's noticed things. He's like, well, there's this about Cersei. There's this about Pycelle. There's this. Any insight on a person that Kevan has, you can be nearly certain Varys has the same insight times 5 or times 10. He's way more insightful, has been around a lot of these people a lot longer. So it's almost like if Kevan has a thought about someone, you can assume Varys has had it too, but with more nuance, more depth, and more understanding of how to use that, how to manipulate the person based on those things. So yeah, even though this is not going to refer to the other TWOW chapters again, I want to repeat the warning. A little bit of a Mercy chapter in here, not very spoilery, but just in case you're trying to avoid that, I'll make sure you know when it's coming. Here are the names of the sections in this episode. I'll give you an idea what's coming. We've got setup, the murder, motive, Varys' expectations, a few questions we're going to ask. We don't have the answers to, but they're great questions for us to be thinking about. Then we're going to talk about Pycelle and why Pycelle was part of this. Why was Pycelle killed? Was he just gratuitous bonus murder for Varys, or was there more point to it? Does this help his goals in some other way? And then what's next? As in, how people are going to react, what they might do, what Cersei might do, what Mace Tyrell might do, what other houses may or may not do, both at court and outside of court, out in the realm. And then maybe we're going to finish up with some who's next, as in who might Varys take out next, who might be a benefit for him to murder and cause even more consternation among people who are like, why are these people dying? And what else Varys can do to pave the way for Aegon along these lines, while people don't even realize he's paving the way for Aegon along these lines. So yeah, as I said, we've covered Kevan's epilogue before, but mostly we discussed the various plot lines within it, which is almost literally all of them. It's an amazing chapter. It was almost like a recap. It was like a narration, a summary of all the various plot lines without a narration, because there's no narrator in this story. So it's a council session where, as councils do, they go through things in detail. Like, next item up for business, let's discuss that. And that serves as a reminder of so many different things that are happening in the realm that are relevant to us. So they're rulers. They're going through the different political implications of what's happening in each region, what they may or may not need to do about it, right? And then he has dinner with Cersei. He catches up with her and catches us up with what's going on with her and with Tommen and Tommen's cats, of course, very important. And the faith comes up, a few other things. George just manages to mix it all in there, framing it within the cold winds of winter, And it ends with the undiscussed character of Varys, as I said in the intro, probably a bigger thing than anything they discuss, and they discuss almost everything. The one thing it's probably not bigger than is winter, which, as I said, frames the whole scene. So, yeah, they discuss all these very important things at council, and the former counselor shows up to stir it all up and shoot Kevan. He's shot very suddenly. Again, even if you felt like something was going to happen, because, again, it's an epilogue, the actual moment of him being shot, it's still pretty sudden. It's still pretty surprising that it came in that moment, not necessarily that it happened in general. I mean, he's just like, yeah, Nina, the way Nina puts it, it's like there's a lot of, it's like minutes from a meeting. You know, you're recapping all these events. So it's almost mundane. It can't be quite mundane because it's a Song of Ice and Fire. It's the last chapter. You know something's going to happen. But the setting is still relatively mundane. He's trying to make it seem mundane, even if, you know, the undertone is something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. But Kevan doesn't know something's going to happen. Pycelle is a little worried about being murdered, but not in the way that it happens, which is kind of an irony. One of the many ironies of this chapter. And it's not necessarily a parallel in the moment, but if you're looking at the book as a whole and the different ways the certain plots play out, Jon Snow's assassination wasn't long before this. So you kind of have a parallel murder kind of to end this section of the book, or this part of the story. Like, two important deaths. Obviously, Jon's is a lot more important, and it probably won't stick, but still, this one's framed in the epilogue at the end, so that gives it a little bit more of a boost because of its placement right at the end, right? It's such an important moment, the climax of the book itself, if not the most important plot, certainly the ending. And what happens to Kevan when this happens, when he's shot? He's confused at first. He thinks of Tywin immediately because Tywin was shot by a crossbow also. Then he thinks of Tyrion because that's who killed Tywin. And he's like, oh, is that who got me too? This is all happening in a split second in his mind. And then he realizes, no, it's none of that, because he sees his murderer. He sees Varys emerge. It's a man, again, missing since the end of A Storm of Swords. That's quite a while. Right? That's 2 whole books almost. He just appears right at the end of the second book since he's disappeared. And it's the longest book. A Dance with Dragons is longer than A Storm of Swords by a little bit. And he's returned at last, Varys has, because Aegon has landed. A major topic of discussion in the council session that the chapter begins with. It demanded a lot of attention, this landing of Jon Connington and Aegon, who they're not even sure if that's who he really is and all that. So as he's dying, Kevin's like, oh, this is more serious than we thought. And Kevan was one of the ones taking it the most seriously, which is part of why Varys kills him, right? Can't have the competent guy making good suggestions that make Varys' job harder. Yeah. A very powerful secret ally. What a problem. Kevin's like, oh my gosh, Varys is on this guy's side? Uh-oh. But I'm dead now, so I can't do anything about it. This is the beginning of a very long plan coming to fruition. Kevin's death is like the milestone of, hey, I'm no longer hiding in the shadows. I'm no longer pretending to be this diplomatic man who's afraid of blood. Oh, I'm bleeding. I'm squeamish. Varys is not that man. Here is what he says. Here's the quote when he comes out to help his man take the throne at last.
He stood in a pool of shadow by a bookcase, plump, pale-faced, round-shouldered, clutching a crossbow in soft, powdered hands. Silk slippers swaddled his feet. Varys? The eunuch set the crossbow down.
Sir Kevan, forgive me if you can. I bear you no ill will. This was not done from malice. It was for the realm, for the children. It's a ridiculous thing to ask forgiveness for. Like, sorry, I just killed you. I mean, it's also a ridiculous claim that it's for the children, even though I don't necessarily doubt that Varys sincerely believes that. But I mean, he's got child slaves in the room with him, helping him do murders, and they have their tongues cut out. Like, yeah, for the children. So, yeah, Varys might also be genuinely sad that this great new world he's building, where the king will be just and kind and educated and proper and all the things a king should be. And everything's going to be great. Sorry, you can't live in that world, Kevan. Varys respects competence. And Kevan is competent, but he's too competent. What Varys doesn't need right now is competence from his enemies. He needs chaos so that his candidate can swoop in and restore stability. The chaos is the thing that Varys is foisting on the realm without their knowledge so that his guy can come in and save them from it. So, and you can see why Varys would actually feel a little sad about this, because most of his career, 20 plus years, he's been maintaining stability. He's been helping the realm stay stable in order to prepare for this, which involves creating chaos in order to then recreate the stability that the realm desperately wants to regain. Stability that Varys falsely helped create by keeping Robert alive, by doing a lot of things that he doesn't actually want to do, but he needs to do in the long term. Remember what he said to Illyrio? He's like, I don't want Lannister and Stark fighting each other now. It's too soon. Now it's not too soon. Now it's not Lannister and Stark. It's Lannister and Tyrell. But same difference. He needs the great houses at each other's throats, not united against him. He needs them to be available to join his side rather than entrenched against him. Had Kevan come along earlier, he might have even been someone Varys protected, kept alive, like a Robert or a Ned Stark. Someone he might have even found a place for in his new regime if things had been differently. But instead, timing and circumstance has made him the perfect target. The most competent are now the biggest targets. If you're smart and good at what you do and you're a Lannister, Varys might want to take you out. And of course, Kevan is at the top of that pile. He's the hand of the king, or was. So Varys wants Lannister and Tyrell to have the worst people in charge. Putting Cersei in charge makes sense. Mace is already in charge, so he doesn't have to do as much work there. He's like, that's perfect. All right, that guy's already in charge. Job done. And he's really good at getting people mad at each other, really good at stirring division between allies and stirring greater division between already existing rivals, which is kind of what the Tyrells and Cersei already are. Like, they were already held together by tape, with people like Tywin holding them together through sheer strength and the value of their shared alliance of, hey, we need you, you need us, we got to hold on to the throne. But if Cersei's in charge, and now that she is, then that's not really the way they're operating. Cersei is operating on a much lower level. She's operating on, they're out to get me, I'm out to get them, win or die. Very, very basic level thinking. She doesn't have the same discipline and stomach for keeping the Tyrells on her side. She just thinks they're out to get her. She's not entirely wrong, but she's certainly wrong about a lot of the details. Kevin's also useful as a symbol of authority. He's the most senior available male Lannister. Natural choice for leadership in a Lannister-led government. It just kind of fits. We in the real world know that's not a good way to decide leadership, but we also know that it's how things are done in this world and in the real world to a lesser extent. Here they're a lot more open with their nepotism here. We have plenty of nepotism in the real world, but here it's like, yes, of course, we do. Nepotism is normal. That's why would we not do nepotism? In the real world, we're like, I can think of a lot of reasons why you shouldn't do that. But here, yeah, it's completely normal. So yeah, you can't have Tommen ruling. He's too young, and obviously we know why they don't want Cersei ruling and why Varys does. So you have to sift the good ones out and let the bad ones rule. That's what Varys is doing. So Kevan dies slowly, right? He's dying, like, oh, the blood's rushing out of him. He's got a minute left or so. And Varys explains to him. He's like, yeah, I'm sorry I have to kill you. So let me tell you why. He says how Aegon has been shaped to rule, how Kevan, your death is actually going to help create a better realm for the world. Don't feel too bad. The world's going to be better because of your death. It's kind of ironic in a sense because George gave us all this rundown of all the different plot lines through the council session and through various discussions and context clues. So many things without narrating. He told us all these things. Yet here, Varys kind of narrates his plans to Kevan as he's dying. Like this super special master of cunning. He's like, you know what? I've had to hide for 2 books worth of time. I'm a guy who likes to talk. I love to gab. I'm Varys. I'm good at it. You saw me at council. I'm always the guy that steps in to be diplomatic. I'm always the guy that assuages people's anger. He's so good at that. He's a talker. So, a part of me thinks this is a little bit of Varys being human here. I think some people maybe overthink this scene. It's like, oh, Varys he's lying. Someone else is listening. Why else would he be talking? Why would he be saying his plans where people could hear them? Is it the little birds are listening? It's like, yeah, he's not third level tricking his own slaves who he has total control over. They can't communicate with other people. They literally can't speak. Like, why does he need to trick his own slaves that he has full control over? I don't think so. I think this is just, George wanted to explain Varys' narrative a bit, and there's just no great way to do that given the POV structure, so why not have Varys just say a few things out loud? It's no big deal. The man likes to talk. We don't need a reason. People say things out loud when no one's listening all the time. Almost everybody talks to themselves, some people more than others. Varys may not seem like the kind of person that does that, but if he's 1,000% certain no one's listening, then there's no risk. Anyway. That's a small point to get hung up on. But honestly, he might be a little lonely. A guy who likes to talk, he has no companionship. But he's also an actor. This is an actor. That's why everything he's done before now, it's like, is he really that much of a manipulator? Yes. He was pretending the whole time to be squeamish, to be calm, to be soft, and all these things, the powders and everything. It's all an image. It's all cultivated. None of that's who he is. This man is dark. This man is capable of very evil things, and you can't put much past him. Nothing is too low. He's been keeping this secret for like 20 years or so, or roughly, the secret of this Aegon, this whole plot. I mean, he's finally getting to do it. It's finally out. Like I can understand why he might be bursting with enthusiasm, or the present moment is so exciting for him. He's like, yeah, we're finally moving. We're finally doing this. It's finally happening. We're finally bringing Aegon to the front. I've been wanting to talk about this for 20 years or 15 years, and finally it's happening. Yeah, it's pretty exciting for him, I think. And he doesn't have anyone to tell. He's an actor and there's no audience, right? So, well, he can pretend he's in a book. Wait, he is in a book. Hey, so we're the ones he's performing for. Hey, that works out pretty well. Let's go through the details of the actual murder. The murder. Real quick, like. It was quick in the book, too, right? Memorable because it was at the end and really sudden. Yeah. He's just standing there, and it happens. Well, let's back up a little, though. First, he's talking to Pycelle, or he's talking to, not Pycelle, but Swift and some other people, and a novice shows up and says the following, quote, "My lord, my lady, I'm sorry to intrude, but there is a boy below. Grand Maester Pycelle begs the favor of the Lord Regent's presence at once."
Dark wings, dark words, Sir Kevan thought. Could Storm's End have fallen? Or might this be word from Bolton in the north? It might be news of Jaime, the Queen said. There was only one way to know. Sir Kevan rose. Pray, excuse me. Before he took his leave, he dropped to one knee and kissed his niece upon the hand. If her silent giant failed her, it might be the last kiss she would ever know.
Got it backwards there, Kevin. The last kiss you ever know. Yikes. Yeah, of course he's referring to Cersei's pending trial by combat, where with Sir Gregor as her champion. I don't know why the heck he's worried about that. That dude's not losing in a trial by combat. Undead monster. George didn't set that up for him to lose. Not the first fight, anyway. So yeah, that's pretty ironic. This chapter really is full of like Red Wedding level foreshadowing that's super easy to miss. We'll go over it in a little more detail later, but this is a good example of that. Like the last kiss she would ever know. Whoops, I got that backwards, bro. So Varys sent this little bird. The actual messenger here is not one of the little birds. It says, I'm sorry to intrude, but there is a boy below. That boy is begging the favor. That boy is a little bird. This was just some novice that brought the message to Kevan. So he's not involved. He's just an unwitting messenger. But the little boy outside, supposedly sent by Pycelle? Pycelle's already dead when this happens. This message is coming posthumously, but falsely as well. Varys sent the message to this little bird as if it was Pycelle. The timing is diabolical, too. Not just for the politics, which, of course, is going to be a large portion of this episode, but the state of the castle is such that he was able to kill Varys and then just sit there and wait without... Varys was able to kill Pycelle and then just sit there and wait without worrying that someone else would show up because it's freezing and it's night. Everyone's huddled up by the fire. There's a lot of subtlety in the chapter that kind of hints at that. And everyone's just going to their fire to stay warm for the rest of the night. It's late. It's the day's over. Yeah, no one's going anywhere. So it's pretty excellent timing. It works out well. And Kevan nicely tips an accomplice to his own murder here. How nice of him. Quote,
The messenger was a boy of 8 or 9, so bundled up in fur he seemed a bear cub. Trant had kept him waiting out on the drawbridge rather than admit him into Maegor's. Go find a fire, lad, Sir Kevan told him, pressing a penny into his hand.
Yeah, who tips their own accomplice to their own murder? Well, Kevan does. That's what happened. Funny how Meryn Trant had the right idea. That's a little bird. Don't let him in. That's one of Varys's. So Trant, oddly smart here by accident. Now he's not. He gets no credit for this. He's just a curmudgeon and not a very good Kingsguard. But he happened to be right. Stopped clock is right. Twice a day kind of business here. And frankly, Meryn Trant should be on the lookout for young people who are murderous because he's on Arya's list. So yeah, Arya may not be the one to kill Meryn Trant in the books, but Meryn Trant should be worried about small people carrying thin swords. And you can't keep all the little birds out. Also, something Arya would be familiar with when she returns to the castle during Game of Thrones after crawling through the tunnels. Remember, the guards are like, you can't keep these scruffy little kids out. Yep, indeed. That's why Varys makes use of them. It's so perfect. So here we go. Another little bird shows up with our next quote. And she opens the door for him. And look how creepy she is. You're probably not even catching how creepy she is unless you're on the lookout for it, but she's creepy. Quote.
The door was opened by a serving girl, a skinny thing in a fur-lined robe much too big for her. Sir Kevan stamped the snow off his boots, removed his cloak, tossed it to her. The Grand Maester is expecting me, he announced. The girl nodded, solemn and silent, and pointed to the steps.
Solemn and silent because she has no tongue. Creepy. I feel bad calling a little girl creepy. It's not her fault. Like, Varys did this to her. She's a child slave trained killer. Though, that's creepy. Silent and solemn. She's children of the corn. In some ways, she's like a young Unsullied. Like, the harsh, brutal training to make her into a killer. Yeah. Obedient, all that. That's creepy. So he goes into the chamber. He notes how cold it is immediately, which to him is a little strange because he thinks immediately that Pycelle loves to keep it, quote, uncomfortably hot. So it's like something's off, but it's not something that's going to set off alarm bells. He's like, oh, the window's open. Okay, that's weird. But if you parse it all together, the silence of the children messengers, the coming of winter, the fact that this is an epilogue. Then we have this comment about a quarrel that comes a little later. It's really funny. There's a quote where Kevan says, I don't want Lannister and Tyrell. The last thing we need is a quarrel between the two. We actually have the quote later, but it's like, quarrel? He was shot by a quarrel. And you could say, oh, come on, Aziz, quarrel. That's a reach. But look, y'all, there's like 1,000 synonyms for a minor argument. Quarrel, tiff, disagreement, dispute, argument. He chose quarrel out of all those synonyms. So I don't know, y'all. I think that was on purpose. So again, Red Wedding level foreshadowing where you might miss literally all of it, but when you go back and look for it, there's like, holy crap, that's a lot of foreshadowing. And you know, it's because the story's so immersive. You can't stop every other sentence and be like, what's going to happen? Let me think about what's coming. That's not really the most fun way to read a story, especially not the first time. So it's not like we're supposed to be catching all these things. Again, George designed the book to be reread, and this is just another example of that. You got examples of that in the very first prologue, and you've got examples of it here in the last epilogue. So it is all in between too. Save the theorizing and thinking and poring over for after the read. It's fun to be surprised. You know, let yourself be immersed and then come here to the podcast. And yeah, that's how I do it. Even me. So yeah, winter had come for Pycelle already. He was already dead, and that's why it was cold. A little symbology there. But also, yeah, Varys opened the window because as he explains, Pycelle, you know, relieved himself. His bowels emptied when he died, a normal thing to happen, and it smelled bad. So Varys, you know, just... I don't like the smell. I'm opening the window. And Varys, of course, Kevan knows none of this. It all happens so fast. Varys explains it to him, though, right after this quote.
Then something slammed him in the chest between the ribs, hard as a giant's fist. It drove the breath from him and sent him lurching backwards. The white raven took to the air, its pale wings slapping him about the head.
That was rude of the bird. Like you just got shot by a crossbow bolt and the raven's hitting you with its wings too. That's just insult to injury, quite literally. To fatal injury. Yeah, he, like I said before, he thinks of Tywin, he thinks of Tyrion, and then he thinks of his own wife. He's like, oh, he kind of realizes what's happening. He already is having the sorrow of what's going to happen to my family. I'll never see my wife again, all this stuff. It's pretty sad, even though most of us probably aren't particularly fans of Kevan, but George is good at making us feel bad for people we don't necessarily have feelings for because it's a very human thing to be like, I'm never going to see my wife again. Anyone can sympathize with that sentiment in a vacuum, right? Forget the fact that Kevan is complicit in war crimes, even war crimes by the standards of this time. I'm not saying modern war crimes, they would be certainly, but like by the standards of his time, they destroyed the Riverlands. He didn't bat an eye at that when his brother ordered him to do this. Like, yeah, all right, the Riverlands will burn because you ordered it. Anyway, so Kevan didn't actually die from the crossbow bolt immediately because Varys ordered his little birds to finish him off. Like he whistled at them. Like, again, these are not treated like people. He whistled at them. Like, yeah. And that line, the way George writes it, and in their hands, the daggers. What a way to end the book. So there would be some stab wounds alongside the bolting, which would be a little different from Tywin. Tywin, there was no other wounds necessary. Tywin died before Tyrion even left the room. But I don't know that anyone's going to take note of that. I mean, they're going to see the stab wounds, and if you were to really think about it, you'd be like, boy, these stab wounds aren't very deep, as almost as someone not very strong did it. You know, you might eventually think of children. You might take a while to think of children as you're, like, who's going to suspect children as the murderer? It's like, that's got to be pretty far down any list of suspects. But it might be curious that these stab wounds were not like adult strength. But who would be the one to figure that out? The Maester. The Maester's going to be the one to make that conclusion. So no worries there. There's no doctor in the house anymore. Varys took care of that. So when we talk about why Pycelle was included in the murder here, that's going to be part of it. But surely that's not it. Surely that's not the only reason. So let's start with motive. We'll get to Pycelle, but let's get to the more important factors first. The heart of it all, the why. Why is Varys doing this? What does he hope to accomplish with the assassination? To answer that question, we'll start with what Varys himself says. Quote,
"Your niece will think the Tyrells had you murdered, mayhaps with the connivance of the imp. The Tyrells will suspect her. Someone, somewhere, will find a way to blame the Dornish men. Doubt, division, and mistrust will eat the very ground beneath your boy king. whilst Aegon raises his banner above Storm's End, and the lords of the realm gather round him.
As if to help prove Varys' belief that Cersei will blame Tyrion, Kevan immediately thought of Tyrion when he was shot. So even he thinks of Tyrion. So it's like, yeah. And he's not going to be the only one, because Tyrion's name will be bandied about quite often, and that will stick with a lot of people. And of course, one of the loudest voices will be Cersei herself. And a lot of people will believe it just because Cersei says so. And it's not unreasonable, given what they know. Given what we know, it's silly. Tyrion's way the heck over in Slaver's Bay. He's nowhere near here. But he does want to kill Cersei, so I mean, he would shoot her if he could, probably. So, yeah. And the trial by combat and his escape. Everybody knows Tyrion escaped justice, that he was freed from the Red Keep. Everybody knows Tyrion shot Tywin. So it's a pretty smooth play by Varys to just remind people of that, to help kick the ball off, help get that ball rolling as to blaming the wrong people. It's pretty effective. And there's something in the series, Nina points out, it's not the only time we have specific weapons used to kind of send a message about the murder. There's some clue there that's in the choice of weapon is relevant. The Dragonbone hilt dagger is kind of along those lines. And Varys also planted that coin in the jailer's room, right? That Qyburn found a hidden gold coin from the Reach, a gardener gold coin that Olenna loves to give away. Everybody knows Olenna loves to cheat the merchants by giving lighter weight gold coins. And lo and behold, one of those exact coins was found in Rugen, the jailer's room. What Rugen, of course, is Varys. But that's the same kind of tactic where he plants, it's not a weapon, the coin, but it's the same kind of idea where he plants something associated with Olenna to get someone who's not that bright to think along these lines. Like, he knows, like, a really intelligent person is going to be thinking, yeah, what an obvious way to get me to think it was Olenna by using this coin. Like, it's kind of straightforward. Like, this looks like a way to get me to think it was Olenna. Like, someone smarter might be wary of that. Just like this would be a way to get me to think it was Tyrion. But Cersei is on that level. This works on her. And it will work on a lot of people. So, and Varys knows that. Not only does Varys understand the way Cersei thinks because he's been around her a lot, he has way more practice because he started with Aerys. I mean, this guy is the most practiced in being a counselor to a kind of psycho person that isn't super smart, but is very powerful and aggressive and violent. So yeah, Aerys, Cersei, we've been through the parallels between them before. Varys is like, man, it's like I'm a man of destiny here. It's like the gods gave me a person that I know exactly how to manipulate. I have so much practice with this. It's like Cersei is perfect. And Tyrion is the ultimate boogeyman for Varys because Cersei is the ultimate puppet to advance his goals, even though she's not exactly a puppet. Figurehead maybe is a better term. And it's kind of interesting to think about that, Tyrion becoming such a boogeyman. And so many people think if Tyrion is a bad guy. So many people think he's, flouted justice, murdered his own father. And they're right. He did those things. But they don't understand the context. But that wouldn't necessarily matter. And the point here is Varys has recruited Tyrion. And Illyrio has recruited Tyrion to be on Dany's side. So this is thinking very far ahead. They've really wrecked Tyrion's reputation here. How are they going to rehabilitate it when they bring Dany into the fold? Or is that not even going to matter because Dany's not going to dance to Varys' tune anyway? And neither will Tyrion. It's very interesting. Basically, how can they leverage Tyrion as an advisor for Tyrion and have this bad reputation around when they're trying to start a new regime? It's a missing piece for me at this point. So a little more on that later. Now, we don't know. Varys doesn't want Tyrion to be made into the villain. He just wants to use Tyrion, the Kingslayer, the Kinslayer, of which he's both already, to really stir the pot with Cersei here. Maybe their plan is to get rid of Tyrion in the long run. Maybe he's just a tool for them. They're going to kill him off, And who would be the Lord of Casterly Rock then for them? Oh, well, Tyrek, the missing Tyrek, who's been missing for so long. What is that called? We call that Chekhov's heir. In this case, it's not Chekhov's gun. It's Chekhov's lion. Chekhov's Tyrek. George R. R. Martin's Tyrek, anyway. So, yeah, so that might be the play here. They're making Tyrion into a villain to make use of this villainy, and then as soon as that villainy has been used, then they toss him aside like they do with a lot of their propped up villains, like Cersei herself. Now, the irony might be that Tyrion really does go more villainous and is too villainous and shuts their whole plan down. He becomes a big part in ruining the Aegon plan with Dany alongside, or leading the charge thanks to his advice, or who knows. Tyrion's the one that's figured it out, though. Dany's gotten some advance warning through the House of the Undying, a cloth dragon on poles and all that, but she may not figure that out right away. Either way, it's another good example of Varys' plans being too big for even someone as smart as him. He's so cunning, so patient, so disciplined, so thoughtful, but this is too big for even him. Like, this is the equivalent of prophecy, the sword without a hilt. Varys is trying to rule a kingdom, trying to manipulate an entire kingdom, the entire nobility. It's too much, even for him. And his candidate isn't what he thinks he is. So he may have gone too far with Tyrion. He may have made Tyrion into too much of a villain, one that can turn around and burn him. Maybe literally with Dragonfire. In some ways, Cersei is a very easy mark because she's so paranoid. Again, that's like perfect for him. So, but he's got another one. He needs to be careful with her. He wants her to go against the Tyrells. He wants the Tyrells to go against her. But I'm not sure he wants full-blown war between them. He just doesn't want them to face the new danger together. He doesn't want Tyrell and Lannister united against Aegon. They don't have to go to war against each other, although maybe that's better for him. I'm not 100% sure on how I feel about that. I haven't landed on a conclusion with that. I'm just very sure that Varys doesn't want them working together. That's the most important thing. Maybe anything else beyond that is gravy. Varys obviously doesn't know about Maggie the Frog prophecies, which is another interesting wrinkle here. Well, he probably doesn't know about that. I don't know how he would have figured that out or learned about that. But it's definitely a wrinkle. Like, Cersei is even more paranoid about this than even Varys can know. He knows she's paranoid. She wears that on her sleeve, but he doesn't know it's supernaturally fueled on top of that. Like, whoa. Now, Maggie didn't prophesy that Kevan would die, but it's certainly a reminder. It's certainly going to make her feel more anxious. She's like, yeah, it's prophesied that my children will die, and one of them already has, and, the others aren't necessarily safe. So, yeah, her closest relative, besides her children being killed in the capital, is a pretty big reminder that she's not safe, that maybe she's living on borrowed time, and that a person like her won't just relax and deal with that. She's going to lash out, which is what he wants. And Nina smartly points out as well that Varys is benefiting from the heightened air of suspicion around court in general. Varys didn't engineer the Orain Waters situation, we don't think, which is, again, Orain Waters running off with Cersei's new warships. Cersei commissioned 10 Dromans, big-ass warships, and Orain just ran off with them. He stole them. He's probably in the Stepstones now. And, yeah, we can be reasonably certain Varys had nothing to do with that. But Cersei doesn't know that. Cersei's going to be like, okay, who did that? Who is he with? Is he with the Tyrells? If she eventually lands her suspicion on Varys, then maybe she'll think he did that, which he didn't. So she's just going to be all mixed up. She's got no idea where to assign blame for all these various things that are happening, some of which aren't really happening. They're just a product of her mind. And if you're a regular listener or knowledgeable about A Song of Ice and Fire in general, you are aware that Aegon is not as perfect as Varys thinks. This is a big thing that I was saying a moment ago about this. Let me come back to it. He's not as humble or decent as Varys thinks. He's not as untested in power. That's a big one. How does any person, especially a young person, respond to being given lots and lots of power? Some of them They just turn into idiots. They get drunk with power. Off with their heads, I can do what I want. I'm the king. Joffrey type stuff, right? I'm not saying Aegon is Joffrey, but power could go to his head too. He might not be a sadist with it, but he could do stupid things, stupid greedy things, stupid boyish things. That's a lot of power to give to somebody. Look how many people out in the real world, they win the lottery and they blow it. They spend it all within, a few weeks or something. Instead of allowing that to be life-changing money for them and like invest it and have that something that's a part of them for the rest of their life. If not for their family, for generations. Nah. People just can't handle themselves when they're handed so much at once. Not everyone, obviously, but that's the point here. We don't know whether Aegon can handle it or not, and I don't think it's been part of his education. As much as Varys and Illyrio think he's humble because of the fear he's experienced and all these other things, he hasn't gone through this. He hasn't been confronted with the throne, the ability to do what he wants, or like Arianne. Like we haven't seen how he reacts to like hot girl wants him. What's he going to do about that? Is he going to just stop listening to his advisors because of what Arianne wants because she's hotter? Maybe, right? Varys doesn't have a clue about these things. Varys hasn't had a lot of personal relationships in his own life. It's a blind spot for him. He understands how it affects other people, but he might not understand how it could affect his own candidate. It's pretty interesting. Now, wouldn't it also be a huge irony if Aegon actually did turn out to be paranoid, like Cersei or Aerys? Maybe not quite to that degree, but like again, what is it? What is it with these paranoid people? Varys just keeps running into them. And as another point, to take it back even farther, Nina writes, it doesn't even necessarily matter how good a prince or a king Aegon turns out to be. You can't fabricate a hero. You can't fabricate the story's hero or a hero in general. He can educate him, you can train him, and all the things that he thinks he's done that Daenerys has actually done. Daenerys has actually escaped death many times. Daenerys has actually ruled a city already. Daenerys has already been tested in power. Daenerys has already been tested in love. She's had stupid relationships, infatuations that a lot of us have when we're a teenager that you probably regret later. The later hasn't come for Dany yet. She's still a teenager. But like, Khal Drogo, that wasn't a good relationship, but she loved him. She was completely smitten, Dario, bad idea. But that's the point. She realized that. She's like, yeah, Dario, like she went through it with Dario and she's already realizing, yeah, this is not a good idea for the long term. Will Aegon have that same realization about Arianne, assuming that's what happens, or about just someone else? Will he navigate his way through the pitfalls of being a teenager, like Dany already has? I don't know. I don't think so. I think that's kind of what George is aiming to show us, that you cannot create this. You cannot fabricate this identity, which in a way makes the murder of Kevan unnecessary and pointless. None of this is going to work, Varys. You don't have to stir up the Lannisters and the Tyrells. Your king is not going to king. He's going to do something else. He's going to be Aegon. He's going to lead from the front because he wants to, even though that's a bad idea for your plan. That's what he wants to do. The puppet won't puppet, right? He's got his own plans and schemes, and yeah. But that makes... If killing Kevan is unnecessary and pointless because this whole thing won't work, well then, Varys' whole career is pointless by that logic. Like none of this whole 20-year plan... It was never going to work. So, Cersei may not be a victim of all this, but, well, her power, yeah, she's a victim of it in that sense, but not her life. Meaning, she's not going to get killed because of Varys' plans, because she's the perfect one to be the spearhead here. And now, Cersei also, the other wrinkle with the Valonqar here is that she thinks Tyrion's going to kill her. She thinks the Valonqar is going to kill her, and she thinks that's Tyrion. Now, the royal many of us, not all of us, most of us think that that's Jaime, that's the little brother that's going to kill her. But again, Varys doesn't know that either. So this is a kind of an interesting wrinkle he's not aware of. The true fear, yes, he knows she fears Tyrion, but he doesn't know just how big. She's going to blame everything on that. I wonder if that's ever going to come out. That would be a weird thing for Varys, because given his anti-magic stance, it's like, She believes in a prophecy? Huh. Interesting. I don't know what he would do with that information. It'd be very curious. Anyway, this is certainly not all about Cersei, even though she is kind of the linchpin, even though she's the spearhead. We do have to look at it from the other direction, and then a few other directions. There's lots of directions here, but mostly it's the Tyrells that are the other big piece here, since they're the other great house being misled into fighting their own allies. Now, as Varys said in the quote, Cersei will blame the Tyrells with the connivance of the imp, and the Tyrells will think she did it. Why will the Tyrells think she did it? Well, to start, they know they didn't do it. So that immediately reduces the amount of candidates. And Cersei benefits very clearly, more so than anyone. It's revenge on someone who put her in the position she's in, for one thing. They can look at it that way. The Tyrells can say, okay, so Kevan had a little something to do with the walk. They don't know Cersei knows that, which she actually doesn't know that. But they might think she knows that. They might think, maybe she figured out that Kevan had something to do with that walk and she wanted him dead because of that. Or set that aside. We don't even need that reason. It just might help. The regaining of power is the huge obvious factor here. No one's going to put that past Cersei. Cersei would kill her own uncle to get power? Yeah, of course she would. No one's going to say, Cersei would never do that. Of course she would. Of course she would. So, in a sense, the gain to Cersei is so obvious that she immediately has the shackles taken off of her and regains the regency effectively, that even Cersei might realize that that's why they would blame her for it. Even her, who is bad at smelling her own BS, she might actually have that revelation. And, something like this. Cersei's thinking, I can see why they think I killed Kevan, given how much I benefited from it. But maybe even not that. Maybe she won't realize that. I think she'll mostly just be focused on them. Like, oh, they did it. I got to get them. That will probably be her burning question, which is a little bit of a similar angle here, because she knows her children are in danger. And that's the number one thing Mace is worried about. Kevan thinks about it multiple times, that he's got blinders on, that Mace has blinders on, that he's very focused on the threat to Marjorie, the trial. That's why he brought his army to King's Landing, because he's worried about what happens if she loses the trial. Everybody doesn't want to say the unspoken that, okay, if you're so concerned or so sure of your daughter's innocence, then why did you bring an army to King's Landing? And Randyll Tarly has an army there too, which there's a wrinkle to that we'll get to later, because Mace obviously assumes Randall's on his side, but he maybe shouldn't. So the Tyrells, again, though, it's less of a complaint. They're not quite as worked up as she is, because Cersei's worked up in part because of the Valonqar, because she's already a naturally paranoid person, and because the murdered person was a Lannister. Like, the Tyrells can't be as upset as Cersei because it wasn't one of their family members killed, right? So she has more reason to be amped up, and she is more easily amped up. So it's kind of a double whammy. But of course, the Tyrells, it's still suspicious. They still will be like, well, if she's willing to do that, what else will she do? Kevan wasn't even connected to them by marriage. They just probably semi-respected him because, well, he wasn't Cersei and he was competent and all this and wasn't as overbearing as Tywin. I kind of feel like they probably got along decently. Kevan was doing a good job. I mean, that's the point, right? And here's the friends in the reach angle here. This is kind of what I was saying with Randyll Tarly. There are those who are already Aegon's allies or who plan to be. Maybe some of them haven't decided yet, or they're going to switch as soon as they get the opportunity. This is going to hearten their cause. They're going to be like, ooh, Kevan was murdered, and now the Tyrells and Lannisters are at each other's throats. Morale. That's what that does for their cause. They're already worried. They're anxious. Okay, we're supporting a secret candidate who's landing in the East. We've never met this guy. We don't know much about him. This is a pretty big risk we're taking. But then things have really started to go their way, though. Tywin dies. Now Kevan dies. Lannister and Tyrell start to go at it. That's great for them. They're like, all right, things are going our way. This just gives them motivation. And I think Varys knows that. He's like, we got to throw some bones to our erstwhile allies so they know things are going well. They need to see progress. Otherwise, they could just back out. They haven't declared themselves. They aren't implicated. It's not past the point of no return. And if things are going badly, they might do the worst and flip to our enemies, right? That's the worst case scenario is Varys does some stuff and the people he was hoping to keep neutral or even on his side actually fight against him. So that's his concern. But it shouldn't be much of a concern because everything's going so well for him. I think the Friends in the Reach will respond to this with gusto. They're thinking, yes, things are going great. Varys is good at this, and they're seeing it. Even if they don't know Varys is doing it, even if they don't know Varys is the man who arranged all this. But surely they have to have some involvement here. Like, who reached out to these Friends in the Reach in the first place? Who arranged these negotiations? How did Jon Connington connect to these houses in the Reach while he was in Essos? Varys. It's all running through him, not directly through his agents, through people, and maybe, well, step back. Sometimes directly, but sometimes through his agents. And we don't even know who some of these agents are. Whether they're little birds, probably not. We're talking about like people that can speak and negotiate and bribe. The people who Varys has working for him, if not him directly. So he's connected to all this. They know, and that's probably a good thing for most of them. You know, Connington doesn't like Varys, but he has to respect how good the man has been at doing all this. He has to respect the game. Varys' game is incredible. It's almost immaculate. And even if Connington can't fully appreciate it because he's not smart enough to realize all the smart things, all the clever things Varys has done, if he's too busy being turned off by him being a eunuch and disliking him for his prejudices, he has to realize what a good plan all this was, even if ultimately I think it's going to fail. It's just so many things were done so well. So yeah, I think that's a big deal. So let's talk about Varys' expectations and how this relates to kind of how he's often run a lot of his game. If we look back on Varys' career, along with Illyrio, the way they ran their game back in Essos, it was basically steal things and then sell them back, or steal things from the thieves and sell them back to the original owners, or profit from secrets, or a combination of the above. That was their game. They evolved to be able to do all those things depending on the scenario. This is very similar to what they're doing here. He's using kind of all that knowledge for this culminative long game of Thrones, as I said at the beginning. Steal stability from the realm, sell it back from a profit. And don't let anyone know that you're the one who stole it. Of course, because then the whole thing falls apart. So the irony here is that is another example of Varys biting off more than he can chew, but in this case, without knowing it. Like so he doesn't know necessarily. There's things he hasn't considered or prepared for with regards to Aegon and what kind of man he might turn into. But he's also giving Aegon way more responsibility than you realize. Do you really want to take the throne and be in charge of it at the moment the others invade? Is that really the best time to be in charge? Like, yo, that's your responsibility now. You just took the throne. That's your problem. Sorry. If you had just waited a few months, maybe take the throne from somebody else after this other thing plays itself out. But sorry, you're the king now? This is your problem. That's the worst time to swoop in and rescue the realm. Oh, civil strife between Lannister and Tyrell? We'll solve that. Wait, there's also the unkillable ice monsters in the armies of the undead. You got to solve that one too, bro? Yeah. And Varys wants you to marry a woman with an army of Dothraki, who I'm sure will adjust well to Westeros and vice versa. There will be no cultural friction whatsoever between the Dothraki and the regular Westerosi, right? No, none of that's going to... They'll get along swimmingly. They'll get along as well as the Dothraki love the poison water. And there's also Euron, Stannis, Grayscale from his own father figure. Like, Varys didn't plan for that. And I mean, obviously Aegon's father figure, not Varys' father figure. But like, there's a lot of unknowns here, a lot of responsibility that Aegon will have to be in charge of, given his positioning himself as the monarch. Like, well, yeah, this is now your responsibility. So there's a lot of instability here. This could sink the ship before he has a chance to right it. If I can use a nautical metaphor like that, Varys' game is rock the boat and then bring in a new captain who can keep the boat stable. Well, what happens if the boat is too unstable and sinks before you can right it and your new captain sinks with it? They've given him too much. The chaos is too chaotic. Yeah. There's too many waves coming to rock this boat that they didn't see. Yeah, if I could just continue with the metaphors. Now, yeah, returning to Cersei here, and all the clues that were given, it's pretty neat. Yes, it's easy to steal stability and steal it back when Cersei already has so much antagonism for the Tyrells. Just Cersei in power in general is a good way to be like, this is a problem. We'll help you solve it. She is instability. She is chaos. But again, George R. R. Martin is nothing if not nuanced. Cersei has her Nirvana moments, and I mean Nirvana the band, not Nirvana the like concept of enlightenment, because Cersei is very far from enlightenment, obviously. And I mean that from what is that Nirvana song? Is it Territorial Pissings? I forget. It's the line is, just because she's paranoid, don't mean they're not after her. That's not the exact line. He doesn't call himself she, Kurt Cobain. But anyway, here is Kevan thinking along those same lines. Quote,
Kevan Lannister was beginning to understand why Cersei had grown so resentful of the Tyrells. But this was not the moment to provoke an open quarrel.
An open quarrel. See, there's the joke. Varys disagrees with this conclusion by Kevan, and he will use a quarrel to provoke it. He will provoke an open quarrel with a quarrel.
Can I just say, that song is from Territorial Pissings. It is also, of course, from Catch-22.
Right, Catch-22, which I have read, but a long time ago. Great book. Kind of forgot about it.
Bigger
really
Nirvana
funny book.
fan than we are Joseph Heller fans.
True. More recent Nirvana and more repeated. I heard that song many times. I only read Catch-22 once. So let's get a little more specific here. Cersei and the Tyrells, what does that look like? How would Varys take advantage of it? Let's try for some details here. Again, to repeat, the most important thing for him is that they don't team up against Aegon. That's number one. He might even, if things go well enough, win the Tyrells over to his side. It's not like they have a child with a Lannister yet. They aren't permanently tied in that sense. Now, I don't know if that's what Varys is thinking in terms of you can't have Marjorie marry Aegon. That's not really the plan. They want Daenerys for that. But maybe that's a fallback plan? I don't know. It's possible. Either way, the Tyrells are not in the same situation as the Lannisters. The Lannisters are just an enemy. There's no way around that. And it's hard to, at least currently, they're the faction that has to fall by the wayside. They're part of the problem that Aegon is offering the solution to. The Tyrells maybe don't have to be part of that. As long as they're not fighting... As long as they're not antagonistic against Aegon, all is fine there. And there's a lot the Tyrells may have to deal with that just keeps them off the board. With certain maneuvering or certain other events, they might just be like, all right, the Lannisters are out. We're not helping them anymore. And we have our own problems now. Old Town is overrun with Ironborn. The Shield Islands already is overrun with Ironborn. The Old Town could have that happen too. And other things could happen. Again, what about Grayscale? What if that just rampages through the Reach or something like that? Like, there's lots of things that could just take them off the board or force them to look inwardly rather than helping to fight against Aegon. Will Cersei strike directly at Mace Tyrell, you wonder? I don't think Varys wants that because, well, Mace is a bad leader. But maybe... someone else taking Mace's place wouldn't be so bad from his perspective. Would that be Willis Tyrell? Well, Willis isn't exactly experienced. He doesn't have much knowledge of even what's happening, probably. He's sitting back at Highgarden and learning how to race horses and falcon. I don't know that he's politically minded. So that might be good from Varys' perspective if the calm and unwarlike Willis Tyrell becomes Lord of Highgarden and he has a less ambitious approach. He's more looking ahead to make sure his house survives, to make sure there's peace. He doesn't have Mace's we have to be on the throne ambition. All behind closed doors, Olenna could be pushing in one direction or another. And I don't think she's excited about them trying to take the throne. I don't think she wanted that. She definitely said that was more of a Mace and his puffish attitude. So, yeah. But Again, let me remind you all what I said before, that Mace's focus, yes, it's the throne, but it's Marjorie. She is their key to the throne. She is their princess. She is the queen. So without her, yes, it's also his daughter, so presumably some of it is his fatherly love, but mostly it's his ambition. Without her, they don't have that. They don't have the conduit to the throne anymore. So he's really focused on the threat to her. Above all else, that's super important. So Mace realizes that Cersei wants Marjorie to lose the trial, and Cersei thinks Mace wants to kill her or is working with Tyrion. Any of this could lead to violence in the halls of the Red Keep. Not something I would confidently predict, but we have to consider that Cersei might just unleash the mountain, not just like go kill everyone you can, but make an example of somebody. Show people what he can do. Maybe the trial by combat will be sufficient for that. But Cersei might want to show people that she's willing to use him outside of a trial scenario to say, hey, look, I'm willing to have someone killed right here in the throne room to show you I'm willing to do it. I dare you to speak up against me, or you're facing the silent giant again. Right? So I think a lot of people will just be like, yeah, whatever you say, Cersei. And she might be ruling more directly with, like a mafia boss with, her number one unkillable thug at her side at all times. And she might have her hands full with the High Sparrow as well. That's a whole nother wrinkle in this scenario. I don't know what kind of involvement or inducements Varys has with the High Sparrow, if he helped at all, or if he will help, or if he'll feed him information, or if he'll try to steer the High Sparrow one direction or another. Varys doesn't want Aegon to have to deal with that either. He wants that to be taken care of, or at least not a problem. Ideally, the High Sparrow supports Aegon. I don't know if Varys will maneuver towards that end or what he's considered with that. But yeah, there's a lot of things that could happen. We could have the Faith in the Red Keep. We could have Robert Strong killing people in the Red Keep. We could have Tyrell's killing Lannisters in the Red Keep. Yeah. And that would be a sure sign that Varys is getting exactly what he wants. If there's fighting in the halls of the Red Keep between Lannister and Tyrell, he could steeple his fingers and laugh evilly and say, "Mwah, perfect." And this is kind of like what happened when Robert died, right? When Robert Baratheon died, there was fighting in the halls of the Red Keep. Ned thought he had the City Watch on his side. Didn't work out. And let me remind you all, Varys thought he had a lot of that in hand. He thought he had come up with the right solution. He's like, okay, here's how we're going to minimize the damage. We're going to send Ned Stark to the wall so that he's not dead, so that the Starks will be mad, but they won't be out for blood. They won't be a vendetta. It mitigates the problem here. But puppet's going to puppet. What does Joffrey do? He's like, off with his head, right? Varys didn't see that coming. Varys didn't expect it. Definitely didn't want it. Cersei didn't want it. So I think that's a clue to what we've been saying all along here, is that all of Varys' smart plans, there's just so many things he can't control, so many things that could go wrong based on just something like that. Just a teenage boy wanting to show off for the crowd. Teenage boy wanting to show off for his new hot girlfriend, Arianne, maybe, or wanting to show off for, I don't know who, but just show off. That's what teenagers do, especially when they have a lot to show off. So yeah, lots of really interesting unknowns here. The High Sparrow, Arianne and the Dornish, what exactly Mace and Cersei might do in response to all this. Furthermore, there's more to it, right? The line, someone somewhere will blame the Dornishmen, is what Varys says there too. That's a clue we should be thinking about beyond Lannister and Tyrell. Of course, we were going to do that anyway, but here's the next step, the Dornishmen. And it's also a thought exercise in what Varys is doing here. Varys knows that people will blame the Dornishmen because they always get scapegoated, and he knows he's smart enough to realize that, yeah. The Dornishmen always get blamed when murder is involved, right? Or because of what Oberyn screamed in front of everybody. Just, yeah, people just are prejudiced against the Dornish, and there's recent things that have happened there. Dorne is a little bit unstable right now, too. So it's a bit of a domino effect, but this is one of the largest dominoes to fall after Lannister and Tyrell. And by fall, I mean take sides. And by take sides, I'm not entirely sure whose side, but obviously Aegon wants the Dornish on his side. Varys wants the Dornish to support him, and that's a big one for the faction that's trying to restore the Targaryens who had the Dornish on their side when they fell. Rhaegar was married to Elia. That's who his children with her were half Dornish. So bringing them back into the fold makes a lot of sense. And of course, once these great houses start to make their decisions, the lesser houses will feel safe making their choices, usually just following along with their liege lord. That might get tricky in some places. But then comes the next question. How in turn will Varys take advantage of all that? Yeah, good question, huh? Let's return shortly with more discussion of just that. Magic Mind has a new variant on their excellent beverage. And it's no longer a beverage. Well, you can still get it as a beverage, but now they have gummies. I love gummies. I'm a gummy fan. I eat gummies of other kinds sometimes. These, however, are for kids and adults, 8 and up. That's right. They only have 1 gram of sugar per gummy. I'm going to eat one right now. They're very tasty. Green apple flavor. I love green apple. And yeah, 1 gram of sugar, 0 caffeine, which is why I assume they're safe for children. I'm not a doctor. I can't say why, but that's what it says here. And all the same ingredients that we've described in detail in the past that are in the beverage are here. And it just might be a preferred way to take it. Rather than a drink, a gummy. Personally, I think it tastes better than the drink. I like the drink, but
I like the drink more, but I also like the gummy taste. It reminds me of the fruit snacks from when I was a little kid.
They are like those little fruit snacks. You're right.
Well, because my parents were hippies, so they would give me like the dried fruit snacks, you know, like they gave me a certain kind of fruit candy. It's like this.
Yeah, it does have that. It does kind of have that flavor. It's a little more like, it doesn't taste quite like candy. It's just a little less like a candy, but it is like.
It's a dried apple. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. It tastes like a dried apple. Very true. So, to celebrate the launch of the gummies, you can go to magicmind.com/howgm or use the code HOW25 to get 25% off on Magic Mind gummies. Enhance your focus, enhance your concentration, develop a routine, take them every day for yourself or for your kids or for your kids. And there's a QR code up on the screen. If you're watching, you can just scan that real quick. Nice and simple. Otherwise, just check the link in the description and improve your focus and routine. It's been great for us, and I think it'd be great for you all as well. Let's talk briefly about the men who are not in charge. We're continuing our discussion about what war in the Riverland or war in the Red Keep might look like, of fighting in the hallways. Well, that tone is set at the beginning of the chapter. So by the end of the chapter, Kevin's dead, and all these things have come out about what Varys is going to do. But the beginning of the chapter, again, looking at it on a reread, you see just how set up this is. A factor that must be considered is all these soldiers that are just hanging out there. Quote.
Randyll Tarly and Mace Tyrell had both brought armies to King's Landing, whilst the best part of the strength of House Lannister remained in the Riverlands, fast melting away.
So it doesn't need to be a full-blown war, like I said earlier, for Varys to get what he needs. Although that might be good for him. But at this stage, it doesn't look like it would be a very one-sided or two-sided affair. It looks like it would be unbalanced. It looks like if war broke out suddenly here, the Lannisters would be wiped out. They have an army, but it's nowhere nearby. They would have to retake the city or regroup or something. Because right now, Mace Tyrell's got his army right there. And if he wants to make a show of it or go full-blown war, he can do that. Again, let's return to the wrinkle here, though, of Randyll Tarly. What is Randyll Tarly going to do? Is he a friend in the Reach? Is he going to turn on Mace? In that case, Mace Tyrell would lose badly because he would be caught off guard, very unprepared. The Tarly men would be ready. And presumably, this could be a direct route for Aegon to take the throne. If Randall Tarly is a friend to Aegon and Varys, and he stabs Mace's army in the back while they're trying to take King's Landing, or defend Marjorie, or something along those lines, they won't see it coming, and then the path is open. They've got a friendly army holding the capital for them. They can march in victorious and be like, here's your throne, sir. We took it for you already. So that maybe could work out great for Varys if that's the play. Because yes, he's like, well, there's a Tyrell army here, and we got to worry about that. But there's no Lannister army nearby, and the Lannisters are the ones who are the bigger problem, right? And, well, what if he doesn't even need to bring his army inside? He doesn't necessarily have to, because he's got the gold cloaks. Most of them. It's not like Littlefinger having full control, having bribed their commander. I don't think it's reached that level, although maybe it has. Kevan thinks during this chapter how Mace has been kind of a jerk about it. He keeps putting Reachman in the City Watch without putting Westerman in. He's like, he thinks without the balancing infusion of Westerman. So it's very green gold cloaks, shall we say. The gold cloaks should be Western, right? They're gold cloaks. But no, they're green. They're turning green like the Tyrells. The gold rose is a gold cloak. So that is maybe all Mace needs, is just to control the gold cloaks. That's like 2,000 dudes. And there's certainly no bigger force inside the city walls. And the only big force outside the city walls is his army and Randall's army. So Mace has reasons to feel confident here. He's holding a lot of cards at the table there, a lot of power. And that's just going to make Cersei even more paranoid, even more worried, even more desperate to change the situation so that the odds aren't so stacked against her. But it's not like the Tyrells can just attack the Lannisters and take them off the throne either. It's not quite that simple. The Tyrells kind of need the Lannisters to hold the throne. So it's a tightrope walk for both of them. And Varys knows that. Now, what about Arianne here? Again, I'm bringing her back into this. This is another funny wrinkle because Varys might not like this. He may not see it coming. Again, if he wants her to marry Dany, or him to marry Dany, then Arianne could really throw a monkey wrench in that. Like if Aegon falls for Arianne, it'll be too late, right? Unless she dies. But how are you going to take that risk? His first love, he falls for her. He's infatuated in love with Arianne, and then she dies. He might be bereft. He might be depressed. He might be not willing to marry anybody. He's shown that he has a spine of his own. He's not just going to do what he's told. So this could really backfire. Varys definitely knows, one thing he definitely knows is that Nymeria and Tyene are on their way to King's Landing. And why does he know that? He's Varys. Of course he knows that. How could he not know that? That's great. The fun thing about Varys is that we can safely assume he knows things like this. Like, yeah, it's two of the Sand Snakes. You can't keep that quiet at court, at the court of Sunspear. Yeah. He might be talking directly to Doran Martell about it, in fact. He may not have sussed it out. He may have been told directly. But if he hasn't been told, he sussed it out. And this was also just openly discussed at council. So, partly. They discussed that, backing up. Kevan actually has yet to bring it up. He's dreading it. He thinks how he's going to eventually have to reveal to Mace Tyrell that, one of the Sand Snakes is coming to claim the Dornish seat on the council that used to be Oberyn's. That's not going to make Mace Tyrell happy. And that's why Kevan hasn't told him yet. So that's yet another thing that will stir up division at court. More chaos in the Red Keep. More people who hate each other, all trying to rule in the same place. So Kevan knows that. Varys knows that. But what Kevan doesn't know is the other one. He knows that, is it Nymeria that's coming to take the
Yes.
Nymeri's taking, Lady Nim, of course, because she's the one with Volantis blood and the one that might garner her some respect that she is descended from old Volantis. Whereas Tyene is there to get in good with the High Sparrow, which throws a whole nother awesome wrinkle onto all this. What effect will she have on the High Sparrow? How will she manipulate / move him, and maybe a little vice versa?
I kind of feel like Nim will have way more success than Tyene.
Maybe.
Like, Tyene has the harder job to me.
She might, because the High Sparrow is going to have a lot of rules on it, a lot of his own sort of...
I don't think he's not going to be pro this Dornish bastard, even if she's the daughter of a Septa. I don't think he's going to like that.
She is, maybe she can say the right things, though, and convince him that she's holy. I don't know. Yeah, you're right, though. You're right to be wary or uncertain of this, because... it is uncertain. So Kevan doesn't know about that. Kevan and the other counselors know about Lady Nim, but they don't know about Tyene, but Varys does. So Varys can take that into account in his plans. He's like, okay, so the High Sparrow is about to have Tyene talking to him, and he might have a sense of how that will go. Like, we don't, me and Nashay are like, it might not go so well. It might, and we're not sure, but Varys might have some confidence in what he thinks will happen there. And of course, going back to someone somewhere will blame the Dornish is also, just to be clear here, there's a lot of just straight up prejudice here. The Reach and Dorne don't like each other historically. So that alone is just going to be the reason for them getting some blame here. And it will bring back some of the old resentment of Oberyn and Willis and all the other Varys, Oberyn defending Tyrion. Like, that's a big one, especially for Cersei. Like, why did the Red Viper defend Tyrion? Why did he face the mountain? Oh, because of his sister? Okay, maybe he's just saying that, though. 16 years later, like, from Cersei's perspective, they've been seen working together already, and that is something she's not going to be able to dismiss. Here's some other questions that I think are interesting that we don't have strong answers for. I just wanted to throw them out there. Some of these aren't questions, they're observations as well. One thing that I think is funny, almost in an ironic sense, is that Kevan in this chapter, he thinks how maybe I could get Lancel in the Kingsguard. Maybe that'd be a good place for him. Even though Lancel is very unfit for the Kingsguard because he can't fight, and other reasons too. But that's so opposite to Tywin, who was like, get Jaime off the Kingsguard. He's like, his brother's like, I want my son on the Kingsguard. And Tywin's like, I want my son off the Kingsguard. So a few parallels here to Ned's murder. Right? Varys wanted to stop it. We talked about that earlier, how Joffrey went off script. It wasn't off Littlefinger. He followed Littlefinger's script instead of the script that Cersei and Varys gave him. But Littlefinger, this is exactly what Littlefinger wanted. Littlefinger wanted Stark versus Lannister, and he got it. So it goes to show that how effective this method can be. Varys is engineering this one. He wants Lannister versus Tyrell. So it's like Varys and Littlefinger both have had their moments of turning two great houses against each other. Now, I don't think Littlefinger cares that Varys has done this one, but Varys definitely didn't want Littlefinger to do what he did. Nina also had a great catch here with the parallels to the murder of Jon. Certainly the murder of Jon Snow, the assassination of Jon Snow, is near this point in the book. So we talked about that at the beginning, how it sets the tone, important political murders here. But that is very relevant, too, that it is a political murder. It wasn't done for gain or revenge personally. Like, Bowen Marsh had tears in his eyes when he killed Jon. He didn't really want to do it. He's not trying to cause war by doing it, but he's gonna. We all know the Night's Watch is going to explode into violence thanks to the death of Jon. Not just because of the death of Jon, actually, but in part because of that. Other things were happening. So the Wall isn't looking for this, but it's going to happen anyway. And Varys isn't necessarily trying to start a war. He's trying to win a war. It may go farther than what he's looking for as well. So we have perhaps violence at the Wall spreading too far because of Jon's murder. We may have violence going much farther than Varys prepared for, given the murder of Kevan. And yeah, Bowen Marsh didn't want to do it. Varys didn't really want to kill Kevan either. He's just like, well, this is necessary. This is for the realm, for the Watch, is what they said when they stabbed Jon, right? And Varys is like, yeah, I bear you no ill will. This is for the children, for the realm, right? It's very similar vibes there. And there's connections to Cersei on both ends here, kind of randomly, because maybe Bowen Marsh got news from Cersei, because remember, Cersei was thinking of arranging for Jon's death and sent men up there who may or may not have arrived yet to maybe do that. So the Bowen Marsh may have done what he did with his help because they thought maybe Cersei would back them up a little, that they could look to the crown for a little support on that, which is also kind of happening here. On the other end, obviously, Varys is certainly banking on Cersei's reaction to what he's done. So Cersei's reaction is a big part of both of these. Another funny moment here, when Kevan comes into Pycelle's chamber, before he sees the body, before he gets shot, he sees the white raven, and he's like, oh, winter. And then he gets shot, right? But this is a man who just walked past a moat full of snow. And he kicked the snow off his boots when he came into the room. It's like, yeah, I think you knew it was winter already. But I mean, yeah, it's the White Raven is still like, oh. But yeah, you knew it was winter already. What counts as winter and what doesn't in Westeros, though, I guess there's a lot of dispute on that. Certainly what the people in the far north would call a light dusting. We could say your mileage may varies. Vary, yeah. Another funny moment here, leading us into our Pycelle discussion. Pycelle points out in the council chambers how Jon Connington once stood where Red Ronnet Connington was, making similar promises about delivering a pretender's head. Because Red Ronnet's like, I'm not a traitor. Give me an army, send me against Jon, my cousin, and I will bring you his head. Because Jon Connington promised to bring Aerys Robert's head. Robert Ronnet, yeah, anyway. Kevan then thinks, old people, they're always making connections. Everything reminds them of something else. Then 2 minutes later, Kevan makes a similar connection when he thinks of the Battle of the Bells and the dead Targaryen princelings whom he saw personally. So it's like, you just thought about someone making connections and then made a very similar connection in your own head and didn't catch the irony. So I love it. George is great with that. So Pycelle, let's talk about Pycelle and why he was included in the murder and why this matters a lot. Here's another bit of foreshadowing that is just makes you shake your head, go, George R.R. Martin, you sneaky bastard. This first little clue right here, quote.
He did not think that Mace Tyrell would be so clumsy as to try to murder either Pycelle or Swift. But if guards made them feel safer, let them have guards.
Mace, no. Varys, yes. But Cersei will believe it was Mace. So, well played, Varys. And it's an irony because the guards wouldn't help. The guards didn't help. Just like guards didn't help Tywin. The guards were standing outside of his door. They were nowhere near when the moment came. Kevan will actually say, as he's dying, there are hundreds of Lannister guards in this castle. And Varys retorts, but none in this room. And that's the problem when your enemy can literally emerge from the wall. What do you do about that? Yeah. So let's talk about this. How does it relate? Kevan comes into the room. He doesn't immediately notice Pycelle's body until after he himself has been shot. In fact, he calls out for Pycelle's help, which is part of the point here. Maybe like, yeah, when something goes wrong, when there's, CSI type work to be done here, crime scene investigations, you need the Maester. And well, the Maester is dead. Here's that moment right after he calls out Pycelle's name, quote.
Then he saw. Grand Maester Pycelle was seated at his table, his head pillowed on the great leather-bound tome before him. Sleeping, Kevan thought, until he blinked and saw the deep red gash in the old man's spotted skull and the blood pooled beneath his head, staining the pages of his book. All around his candle were bits of bone and brain, islands in a lake of melted wax. He wanted guards, Sir Kevan thought, I should have sent him guards. Could Cersei have been right all along? Was this his nephew's work?
This is part of why Varys calls Kevan a good man in service to a bad cause, even though, again, war crimes. Even as Kevin's dying, he still feels bad. He's like, I should have given Pycelle guards. He thinks of his wife. He thinks of people who will miss him and things like that. So he's thinking of other people even as he's dying. So that's part of like the goodness in him, if you're looking for it. But basic detective work here. Pycelle was killed by Varys, not by one of the little birds. And we know that because his head was smashed open. He wasn't stabbed repeatedly with little child daggers. A little bird isn't strong enough to cave an old man's skull. And even an old 80-something-year-old man like Pycelle, no, you can't do that. They're just too short and not strong enough. Let's remember that Varys acts squeamish around blood. I've pointed that a few times, but this is the most telling moment of all. It's one thing to shoot someone with a crossbow bolt, but he caved in Pycelle's skull with some heavy object. And it's been a little while. He's been standing there in the room while that blood and bone and brains all sitting there. He's not squeamish about it. He's just biding his time. He doesn't like the smell of the empty bowels, but the blood doesn't bother him at all. Again, actor. So, and you can tell it's been a little while, not just because of the smell and the cold, but because of the pooling wax and nothing tells time like a candle, right? You can say, oh, look at all the wax. So why didn't he kill Kevan and only Kevan? He lured Kevan into Pycelle's chambers to kill him there, to make it look like a double murder. It was a double murder. It doesn't look like one. It is one. So let's get specific as to why it helps. Number one, Pycelle is a major Lannister toady. It looks like you're killing someone on the Lannister side, along with Kevan, who is obviously a Lannister himself. The last thing Varys wants is anyone else throwing their weight behind someone who is an Aegon. Again, that's still rule number one here. I can't reiterate that enough. Number two, even though he's a Grand Maester, that's not the highest position of authority. It's a reasonably high placed position of authority. He tends to the rookery, the messages that come by Raven. So he's an important part of the communications system here at the Red Keep. So that's pretty big. Also, it just heightens tensions. Just a second body, another death at the Red Keep just makes everyone scared. One body makes them scared. Another body, even more scared. Who's doing this? Why? How did it happen? How did the murderer sneak in? There's so many confusing questions here that all point to nobody's safe. And the Citadel is going to have to send a replacement. They don't know if maybe they won't, maybe they'll wait, because I don't know if we should send a Grand Maester while things are so uncertain. Maybe they will. Maybe Cersei will reject the person. Maybe they'll ask permission first. It's a whole to-do. Without a Grand Maester in place right now, though, things are kind of, some things will fall by the wayside, which might be part of what Varys wants. Part of the chaos, part of the instability that he will then sell back to the realm. Now, a part of me considered whether this was just a little extra for him. Like, Pycelle hates Varys, insults him regularly. So maybe part of this was like, Varys is like, yeah, I'm so glad my plans align with me getting to kill this guy, a little extra bit of satisfaction. So I wondered if it was like a bonus death, like, yeah, I'm going to kill this guy because he sucks. I hate him. But no, this was pretty much just business. He might have taken a little bit of extra pleasure in it because, yeah, this guy has insulted him so many times. But ultimately, Varys is sticking to the plan. This is definitely a murder for reason, it's not a gratuitous, I get some revenge bonus time here. Even if he did enjoy it, which he might have. So, again, I'll repeat that the lack of a maester immediately is going to make it harder for them to figure out what happened. And as Varys says, Cersei will blame Tyrion, will suspect the Tyrells are on his side, and given Pycelle was so close to, like, Tywin, and by extension, Kevan, everyone knows this too. It was like a well-known bias. So Cersei knows that too. Cersei's like, okay, so that's a second person who's my ally that's been killed. Obviously, they're coming after her family, their power block, from the way she sees it now. Of course, Tyrion's not included in that. But Tyrion's enmity towards Pycelle was quite public too. Everyone knows Pycelle testified against Tyrion. So if Cersei's first thought is this was Tyrion, Pycelle's body only fuels that fire. Pycelle was nasty to Tyrion on the witness stand in the trial. And to be fair, Tyrion stole poisons from him and dosed him with them. and to be fair to Tyrion, Pycelle sold him out on the matter of the Myrcella marriage, which brings back the point of Pycelle being in charge of communications. A lot of what comes and goes by Raven, Pycelle, well, I should say, had access to. And who did Pycelle sell Tyrion out to in the matter of the Myrcella marriage and keeping that a secret? Cersei. So Cersei, the way her brain works is like, oh, Tyrion wanted to kill Pycelle because he hates him. She would be less thoughtful of the political ramifications here, even though they're very important, and just make her hone in more on Tyrion. It's very perfect. So again, this is not gratuitous. This is there was a big point to this. Varys knew what he was doing when he killed Pycelle and where he killed him and the timing of it. And we also have the Tyrells pushing hard to put more of their own people in the council or in more important places in court. That was what had Kevan thinking, I can see why Cersei gets frustrated with these Tyrells. You give them an inch and they want to take a mile. That was one of his thoughts. He's thinking how he was trying to balance the council. He was like, let's have an even number of Lannisters and Tyrells on the small council. And even before that, Cersei was trying to stop the appointment of Garth the Gross on the council. Garth Tyrell, that's Mace's uncle. He was going to be Master of Coin, remember that? Until Cersei lied and was like, you're going to have to tell Garth he can't have that job because I've already given the job to Lord Giles Rosby, she hadn't, but she told Giles Rosby to pretend that she had already offered him that job before. And then, of course, Giles died, and then Sir Harry Swift has the role now. And Harry Swift is not too bright. Now, Mace has even tried to replace Sir Harry's afterwards anyway. He's like, get rid of Sir Harry's and put Garth in. He's way better at this. And that's actually probably true. Mace is trying to get power. This is about ambition. But Sir Harry's is horrible at this job. And Garth was at least Lord Seneschal of Highgarden. He might have been bad at it, but he at least has experience. He might be corrupt, but he's probably not incompetent, whereas Harry Swift is incompetent. In this very chapter, we saw Harry's complain about having to go overseas to borrow money for the crown. And then in the Mercy chapter, we actually, we see him do that. Slight spoiler warning. He's trying. He's not really trying. He's just going to a play and doesn't want to go back because he's failed to get the money Cersei wants, and he doesn't want to go face her, which reminds us that Cersei is effectively in charge again. Exactly what Varys wanted. So that part worked. Pycelle also in that council session, which I wonder if Varys was listening to. Probably was. He probably heard everything they said. Pycelle was like, yo, these rumors from the east about dragons, we should take that seriously. Varys is like, shut up for good. Shut up about the dragons. Shut up about the dragons. So Varys is like, he doesn't want people. He's like, I would rather people continue to pretend those dragons rumors aren't real. I would rather them forget about that for now. Yes. And again, just real quick, back to the Citadel thing and the Grand Maester. Even if they pick one right away and have some in mind right away, it would be like a month or two before that person arrived at the fastest, And Cersei would be suspicious of almost anyone they send because it's Old Town. That's in the Reach. She's going to be suspicious of anyone like allied to the Tyrells, and their High Towers are a vassal. She doesn't have any other experience with the High Towers, notably. So it's not like she can be, the High Towers are cool. I know them. Nah, she doesn't have that. So she's going to, anyone coming from the Citadel, she's going to, that's Cersei's paranoia. Now, here's another quote. Kevan thinking about how Pycelle was right. And here's why Pycelle was worried. Quote,
Lord Tyrell loves me not, Grand Maester Pycelle said in gloomy tones when the hand had departed. This matter of the moon tea, I would never have spoken of such, but the Queen Dowager commanded me. If it pleased the Lord Regent, I would sleep more soundly if you could lend me some of your guards.
more George humor here too. Kevan thought Pycelle, with his head pillowed on a book, was asleep at his desk when he first saw him. I would sleep more soundly if you could lend me some of your cards. He thought he was asleep. Yeah. And Pycelle's like, yeah, I didn't want to be caught in between these two queens here. I didn't want to accuse Marjorie of moon tea in open court. And Mace Tyrell definitely didn't want to hear that. So Pycelle that's why he was worried that Mace Tyrell might come to kill him. And Kevin's like, yeah, Mace Tyrell's not going to just kill you. But yeah, Varys will. So, pretty ironic for sure. So Pycelle was worried about that. And that's going to be, he said this out loud. So, which means other people heard him. And Pycelle may have said this to somebody else. Now, Kevan can't reveal this because he's dead, but Sir Harys was standing right there. Harys, again, is not very smart, but he heard Pycelle say this. So if he thinks about it at all, he will probably think of it in very straightforward terms, meaning Pycelle was worried about Mace Tyrell killing him, so the murderer must be Mace Tyrell. Or, since Tyrion used a crossbow, it must have been Tyrion. Maybe Tyrion and Mace Tyrell are working together, just like what Varys wants, just like what Cersei thinks.
Oh no.
How many series did I just set off out there in the world? So, Arya Swift, though, is a vassal of the West and is afraid of Cersei. So he might just tell her or do what she wants. Because he's not so stupid as to realize that Kevin's death put Cersei back in charge. That's one thing that any noble can understand, is who's in charge next. They're born to follow, even the nobles. So, another thing he might do, though, because he's not smart, is to say these things out loud. Like, he might say to somebody, one of his friends, a drinking companion, that Mace did it, or that he suspects Mace, or that he suspects Tyrion. And that could spread rumors, which is probably what Varys wants too. Now, he's not spreading rumors anymore because he's over in Essos. He's at plays, in Bravos, failing to get money from the Iron Bank. So, I don't think he's telling those rumors to anyone that matters at this point. But if he says it out loud near one of his guards and they come back, who knows? These aren't things we'll necessarily hear about, but the vectors of how this rumor spreads are laid out for us. It's going to be believable when this news spreads around in the way that Varys wants it to. And as that happens, more and more people will react and decide and choose. So again, as we keep doing, we have to look at this from multiple angles. We did it with Kevan. Cersei will blame Tyrion and the Tyrells, as we've said several times. Now, who else will the Tyrells blame and suspect besides Cersei? Now, that's a big one, but it's not necessarily the only one. Nina says, I think it's very possible the Tyrells will blame Cersei, thinking that Cersei got rid of Kevan to reaffirm the regency. Because another factor that I didn't even mention was Kevan was planning on sending Cersei back to Casterly Rock. So there's yet another reason for Cersei to want Kevan dead. But that doesn't mean they'll stop there and say, okay, that's so much motive. It's definitely Cersei. Because they might consider who else does she have with her? Does she have other allies? Or is there other candidates worth considering? Here's a quote that transitions us away from Pycelle and to other subtopics. Quote.
Pycelle is not the only council member our hand would like to replace. Mace Tyrell had his own candidate for Lord Treasurer, his uncle, Lord Seneschal of Highgarden, whom men called Garth the Gross. The last thing I need is another Tyrell on the small council. He was already outnumbered. Ser Harys was his wife's father, and Pycelle could be counted upon as well. But Tarly was sworn to Highgarden, as was Paxter Redwine, Lord Admiral and Master of Ships, presently sailing his fleet around Dorne to deal with Euron Greyjoy's Iron Men. Once Redwine returned to King's Landing, the council would stand at 3 and 3, Lannister and Tyrell.
George showing us a lot of the competitiveness here between the two houses while also having Kevan just make some bad estimations of what's going to happen. He's right that Pycelle could be counted on until he, of course, was killed. Paxter Redwine, though, and Tarly. Tarly was sworn to Highgarden, but he's probably a friend in the Reach and probably is going to turn on Highgarden. Paxter Redwine probably won't turn on Highgarden. He'll just lose to Euron Greyjoy's Ironmen, probably. Whatever Euron has planned for him will probably work. So Kevin's sitting here thinking, once Redwine returned to King's Landing, Redwine's not returning to King's Landing, y'all. I really don't think that's happening. And even if he survives, King's Landing might already be in someone else's hands by the time he's capable of returning there. And I don't think he will be capable of returning there. If he escapes, it'll probably be back to the Arbor, which will be closer by than King's Landing. He won't sail all the way back around to be like, I lost. No, he'll head home and be like, I lost. If he survives at all. And all of this, though, once again, we can assume Varys knows all of the things that Kevan just thought of. Every single bit of it. He knows that Kevan wants a balance between Lannister and Tyrell. He knows Paxter Redwine is off fighting Euron Greyjoy. He might not realize that Euron Greyjoy is going to win, though. That's something for us readers and Euron to realize. So that part, even Varys might be surprised by that. And that's part of the fun here is what will even Varys be surprised by? Again, the others, all that stuff happening in the north, he's got no idea about that, I don't think. And he's got no idea of the Eldritch Apocalypse, to coin poor Quentin, that's coming from Euron. So Varys can't plan for the supernatural. It's something that was introduced to us early. Even if Varys was lying to Tyrion about the voice and the flames, even if he's not really a hater of the supernatural, he has no experience or expertise in it. So either he actually hates it and has a blind spot for it, or just has a blind spot for it, like everybody. Who is an expert on the supernatural in A Song of Ice and Fire in world? Nobody. We readers actually are the experts, as quote unquote experts. We know because we know more about the supernatural in this setting than any single character does. So we're the closest thing to that. And we can tell that Euron's going to win, right? Just for story reasons and other, Eldritch Apocalypse reasons. Like, you can't not have the Eldritch Apocalypse, right? We don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but Euron's not going to lose to Paxter Redwine. Come on, right? There's a lot of things Varys can't see coming. The way the dragons will behave, the way Dany's going to behave, the way the Dothraki are going to behave, the way Aegon's going to behave. All these carefully laid plots at the Red Keep between human beings, between people who behave like humans, who act with pragmatism, who act with human emotions that you can understand and predict. That's all going out the window because of all these things that are inhuman, subhuman, or non-human, or just dead. like, forget human, living flesh walking around animated. Like, what does Varys think of Sir Robert Strong, for example? What's his opinion of the Silent Giant? Does he have a plan for that, or is he just going to allow it to work itself out? What's his opinion on that? I have really wondering about that one. Because as much as he knows that all these people, that's not a person. One thing missing here is Kingsguard. I don't mean that they're missing. I mean that Cersei's got Robert Strong, she's got Meryn Trant, and then we've also got Jaime out in the Riverlands, and Loras Tyrell is maybe burned badly. There's missing, and we got Boris Blunt, who's incompetent. There's missing Kingsguard. I mean, as in there's open spots. Cersei could very well look to name new Kingsguard. That's her purview, and pick people that are loyal. That's something that she might work with, something that she isn't totally paranoid about, which is another parallel to Aerys. Aerys was afraid of just about everybody except his own Kingsguard. And we talked about in the Summerhall episode how that might be because the Kingsguard saved him from wildfire and his family from wildfire. Well, not all of them, but their bravery kept him alive, and that might be why he trusts them. I don't know how Cersei's going to look at that. She wasn't saved by a Kingsguard in that regard. She slept with one quite a lot, but that's not nearly the same thing. Who's going to be Hand? We know Cersei regains control as the regent, you know? Or yeah, but it's strange, right? You know, Tywin, I mean, I think I misspoke earlier. Mace is hand to the king and Kevan is the regent, but it's not clear on how power will fall and be redistributed with Kevan's death. Maybe Cersei just becomes the regent and rules as queen regent again. That seems like the simplest and most likely outcome. But is she going to keep Mace's hand? Will she try to push him away? Will he fight back on that? Varys may stoke that fire. He may find a way to get information to Cersei that makes her really want to get rid of Mace even more. Yeah, there's a lot of things he could do. And maybe the other way. He could maybe give some information to Mace. Tell Mace things that will help him defeat Cersei in order to pave the way for Aegon. Give them both information that will have them destroy each other. That kind of thing. Now, Varys is mostly concerned with the Crown Lands, King's Landing, Stormlands, the Reach, and the West, and the Riverlands. He doesn't really have a lot to do with the Vale, especially because the Vale is likely to focus northward anyway. And then the North, which is also likely to focus northward, is relatively like the Vale is going to look at the North, and the North is going to look at the Wall and beyond the Wall. So Varys might be able to just kind of ignore all that for now and just let it take care of itself and seize the throne. And then once his man is in charge, he can deal with that later. And again, Iron Isles, that's a problem for everyone. It's not a unique problem to Aegon and Varys. It's a problem for everyone. So that one's kind of just hanging on over everyone. At court, though, let's remind ourselves of how tense things already were. Varys is creating a very tense situation, but it was already really, really tense. Quote,
Lannister spearmen in crimson cloaks and lion-crested half-helms stood along the west wall of the throne room. Tyrell guards in green cloaks faced them from the opposite wall. The chill in the throne room was palpable. Though neither Queen Cersei nor Queen Marjorie was amongst them, their presence could be felt poisoning the air, like ghosts at a feast.
That's really powerful image and really strong evocative writing. The ghosts at the feast, Cersei and Marjorie, their presences looming over everything. Those men with little to do, but face someone that they might have to kill later.
Especially because we have the visual of the Greens versus the Blacks and the Dance of the Dragons. You can picture many scenes like that where Rhaenyra and Alicent were nowhere to be seen, but it poisoned the air.
It's a great point. Yeah, it's just green and gold instead of green and black. That's really true.
It was really green and red. It's like Christmas in there.
That's true. Crimson and gold. Yeah, you're right. Crimson.
We both got gold, the Tyrells and Lannisters.
Bloody Christmas. I remember what a big deal Tywin's death was. Like, of course, we saw a lot of that through Cersei's point of view, which is kind of interesting to have this coming back around. It's not as big because Tywin was a bigger deal than Kevan, but it's big in a sense that it's happening again. It's like, oh, a second murder in the Red Keep, second murder of a high official, the regent. Jeez. 2 Lannister brothers, another one killed. Everybody knew how connected they were. So it's just like no one could fail to miss that connection. And it's beyond the suspicion, it's the appearance of weakness. This makes them look weak. You can't protect your high officers. They're killed in their own home, basically. The place they live, you can't save them. Like, that's weak. And as we saw with Pycelle, before Kevan's murder, he was worried. He's like, I need protection. How do you think everyone else at court is going to feel now that these fears were voiced and came to roost? Like, yes, proof. We do need protection. People are dying here. Counselors getting shot and had their skulls caved in. The Red Keep is dangerous. It shouldn't be, but it is. And again, one of the craziest things about all this is so few, if anyone, is even gonna think of Varys. He's been gone for a while. He's causing so much of this. And they're not even going to think of him. They're not even going to consider that he's involved somehow. A few might briefly think of him because of the Tyrion stuff, and well, Varys maybe had something to do with Tyrion's escape. It's kind of indirect, though. They don't think of Varys as someone that's a killer like that. You know, they think of him as squeamish and soft and maybe dishonest, sure, but I don't know that they think of him as doing something direct like this. And that's amazing, because something chilling and simultaneously fun to consider is that this is Varys' first big move after Aegon's landing. What else is he going to do? He's just getting started. He's going to unleash his intrigue in ways never before seen. He's so smart, so good at this, and he's been preparing for this for 2 decades-ish. A long game that's come to roost. Juggling, wizardry, as Illyrio calls it, but now it's time. Light the fuse, flip the switch, unleash the slowly gathered resources for this long-awaited moment. I accidentally wrote light the fust instead of light the fuse in my notes here, which is just kind of funny. Fust. Light the fust, Varys, whatever that means. It's go time for Varys. No more diplomacy, charm, dissembling, niceness. He blew his cover at the end of his Storm of Swords. Now he's out there. He showed he pretended to be nonviolent. Now he's caving people's skulls in. His plans have pitted people against each other before, but now it's in the open. Now it's earnest. Now it's time for his chosen candidate to ascend during a time of civil strife. Kevan is a model for what Varys can do here. This murder accomplishes a lot. What other murder can accomplish a lot for him? Maybe not quite so much with one murder. This is really hard to top. But there's things he could do. By killing or discrediting the right people, removing them from the board, the Game of Thrones board, Varys can advance his own cause in other ways. And this is where the theorizing gets really difficult. We throw names out and think about it and say, well, that might be someone Varys wants to kill, but this gets so complicated because we're dealing with such an intelligent character. It's the peak of George's writing. So yeah, who's next? Perhaps that's a more directly important question. Because imagining the different ways Varys might manipulate public opinion or set houses against each other, it's kind of infinite. There's so many possibilities there. But guessing at who he might murder, well, there's only so many names we have. Maybe he'll murder some tax collector or a series of them, or captains of the gold cloaks or certain gate guards to make sure that the gates can be opened for his armies or what have you. We don't necessarily know those names. But of the ones that might matter, we can make it like a shorter list, right? Especially because Varys, if they're not pinning it on him, if they're not thinking of him, what's stopping him from just emerging from another wall and shooting somebody else? They don't necessarily have a way to stop that. What are they going to do? Just not operate in the Red Keep anymore? Or we're not going to conduct business in the Red Keep anymore. It's too unsafe. That looks so weak. He's the only person that has mastered the Red Keep's tunnels, which might be something that he would kill over. Maybe he'll kill Qyburn. Because if Qyburn starts to learn his way around the tunnels, and I don't know that he has, but if he does, better shut that down. Doesn't want anyone. This is his home field advantage. Those tunnels are all his. He's the only one that's mastered them. Don't let anyone else learn that. So that's a particular brand of competence that he might want to shut down. So Cersei is the only one I kind of think he would definitely not kill, at least not anytime soon. Olenna is lucky, perhaps, that she's not around, because Cersei doesn't like her, and Varys might kill her to stoke the embers and be like, "Oh, look what Cersei did." Mace Tyrell, I don't think Varys would kill Mace Tyrell at this juncture. Though maybe he would if it came down to his army, it comes time for the Aegon to actually take the throne, but maybe not before that. For the same reason, of course, the High Sparrow probably isn't going to be assassinated. At least not until some particularly important time. And if it happens, well, Varys would pin that on Cersei or the Tyrells and cast his king, Aegon, as a good guy. Oh, Aegon will avenge the murder of the High Sparrow. Right? That could happen. We know, so oddly, Paxter Redwine is safe from Varys, not safe from Euron. And Ser Harys is kind of safe because he's in Bravos. Varys can kind of ignore him. He's kind of out of the way. I don't suppose there's much purpose in killing him. Maybe there is, though. Interesting. Maybe killing Ser Harys in Bravos would make Cersei even more paranoid about other things. So yeah, Qyburn is definitely a possibility. I think Varys might want to take him out, but the reason to do that might be to just... That's a way to deal with the Mountain. Well, this is his caretaker. Kill his caretaker and the Mountain will just start going berserk and other people will have to deal with that. Maybe that's how to deal with the Mountain. Lady Nym and Tyene, right? Again, Kevan didn't want to tell Mace, knowing he'd be upset. Well, let Mace be upset, says Varys. Let him be upset. Let him know. And then maybe kill one of them to inflame the Dornishmen even further. And like, yes, see you. This is fight for Aegon. Aegon will avenge the murder of Tyene or Lady Nym or both of them. And what other friends in the Reach, whatever they need to get going, whatever they need to commit fully. Maybe a key death. Maybe a certain lord has to die so that son can take over. That son is all about it. There's a lot of examples out there waiting to happen that George maybe just hasn't given us the information on because it wasn't relevant until now. All he's got to do is mention a few houses, the names that we've heard of before. One or two lords dies suddenly and the son or daughter or whoever takes over has already been sussed out by Varys as like a violent guy, maybe like a dark star, someone who really wants to make a name for themselves by starting a war. Well, that's the kind of person that Varys might arrange to be in charge for certain houses and the kind of person he might take out for other houses. Like, well, I don't want the violent guy in charge because I want them to sit out. I want the passive Willis Tyrell in charge, or I want the aggressive Euron Greyjoy. I mean, I'm not saying Varys had nothing to do with Balon's death, but obviously Euron taking over changed the Iron Islands dramatically. So that kind of thing. Varys would have a list of like every lord of significance and would have some sort of dossier on them in his head. He didn't write it down probably about what kind of person they are and whether they're a candidate to help or hurt or option C or D, whatever that might be. Randall Tarley, probably not. Because he's probably a friend in the Reach. Randall Tarley's probably an ally already, so he probably gets left alone. He's probably someone that Varys helps pave the way for rather than someone he takes out. So that's a big mystery, and some of it is just mysterious because George probably hasn't bothered to explain it yet. A lot of houses that might get involved here, houses that are maybe connected to the Golden Company, Fossaways, gosh, there's so many other names that haven't been said in a while, names that you might be more familiar from Dunk and Egg that aren't very big in A Song of Ice and Fire, like Harold, what's the other Harold's name? Humphrey Harding. No, the Humphreys, not the Harolds. Humphrey, I'm thinking of Harding, and I can't think of the other one. Anyway, there's lots of names of houses. There's so many houses, especially in the Reach, which is the most populous, but there's also the Stormlands, and also the certain houses in the West might actually be willing to turn against the Lannisters. So again, predicting what Varys will do is just too much. It's like predicting what Littlefinger would do. It's impossible. It's like predicting what the prophecies will say, It's just not, it's fun to run your mind through it, but you'll never have solid answers. You'll just be tempted by all the possibilities. You'd be like, oh, look at all these options. There's so many things that could happen. So many ways this could go. It's amazing. And this is a great example of the questions being fascinating by themselves. Rather, the questions alone are so compelling and give us a sense of how much more there is that is yet to come. And that is just a wide open bunch of awesomeness. Dornish Dame adds, I think there will be a few that die for the crime of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yes, 1,000%. Kevan arguably was that. Like, I think Varys, when I was opining earlier how Varys might have had some genuine sadness for Kevan because he thinks this is a guy that could have been an effective part of a new regime if circumstances were different, if it weren't for his brother and his niece and some other things. but maybe a little more literally in the wrong place at the wrong time. Yeah, just people that guards, like I said, certain people in charge of certain gates or certain money or certain messages. Someone's like, you can't carry that message to that person. The messenger's got to die. Do kill the messenger because we can't have that. Yeah. That is the collateral damage, or a form of collateral damage that people refer to in war. The people that, they didn't do anything wrong. They're not directly involved, but they happen to be, as Dornestein puts it, in the wrong place at the wrong time, meaning a very unlucky place for them to be at that time, because much more powerful people have them killed and never bother to even care about who that individual was that they just killed, because they're more concerned with power and gain, and little individuals beneath their feet mean nothing to them. And that includes Varys. He, again, should not fool you like the TV show did. I don't know if they consciously made Varys a good guy in the show because they actually thought that's what he was in the books, or they just decided to change him. But it just adds to people's mistaken impression of what kind of man Varys really is. And that makes him one of the most fascinating characters, because this meta wrongness that people have about him is part of the fascination, frankly. I think that's interesting. Even as I'm calling people wrong, the royal we, the royal them, rather. It's fascinating to me that people take it that way, because what Varys is trying to do. Varys, he worked. He did his job. He convinced some people out there that he's actually a good guy.
I know. I have like Varys sympathies within me that I can't help but...
Can't shake it. He's so good at it. The guy's very convincing. It's a really well-written character.
Yeah, I want to believe, even though I know he does. I wish the show had really shown that more.
Yeah.
I think it would stick with me more if I had seen it more up front.
It's more interesting to have a guy who thinks he's doing right that is flawed than a guy who is just pure good. Basically, it's kind of how they tried to make him in the show. He's like, oh, no, I will stand up to Dany. I will die on my principles. Like,
yeah, I would be so curious to see how tortured Varys is. Like, if he sits with the little birds and he just is torn up inside over it, or if he's just kind of hardened to it. I don't know.
Yeah, it is. It's super interesting. It's one of the most fascinating, endlessly fascinating characters. And that'll probably be true even after it's all said and done. Because we won't know some of these things. Some of these answers will never be revealed to us. But that's part of the fun, y'all. Our trivia question was, who during the council session in this chapter twice says, if it is Connington? The answer is Randall Tarley.
You know who said that right away? Most valuable chatter, Dornish Dame.
Dornish Dame. Good job, Dornish Dame. Yes, it was indeed Randall Tarley. First time he says, if it is Connington. The second time he actually says, if it is him, when someone else says Connington. It's almost comical. It's like he's just not good at convincing people to look the other way. He's like, you shouldn't pay attention to this guy. It's just too unsubtle. But they don't even know what to look for, whereas we do. So their suspicions aren't raised by him saying that, because they're not suspicious in the slightest about this. They're like, oh, Randall Tarley. Does this mean Randall Tarley's going to turn on us? Just because he's doubting it's John Connington? It's not a rational of a conclusion given what they know. But what we know, it's extremely rational and very telling. Next week, we do not have a live stream, but we do have an episode. Baelor 3, the life, or the death and legacy of Baelor the Blessed with Nina Cruzling. Almost said her maiden name there. It takes a little getting used to. Nina Cruzling will returning. We recorded that offline, and it will be up next Sunday. So for video, and then the week after for podcast. So no live stream next week, but we'll be back the week after with one. And onward. Thanks for attending, everybody. We appreciate your presence. We appreciate you spreading the word. We appreciate your support in all the different ways you can help out our show. We are very lucky to be able to do this for a living, but we're not sitting here raking in the cash either. So we do appreciate your support. Thanks again to Nina for her excellent takes. Great notes on Varys. Such a difficult subject. I appreciate her theories, ideas, and attention to detail. Thanks to Joey Townsend for our great music. And Michael Klarfeld, who we just got to hang out with last week. He was here in the U.S., and that was a lot of fun hanging out with him here in Atlanta and up in Chicago. Shout out to Steve Van Prien, who we hung out with as well, and Tommy and Lita Pappas, who were our hosts and good friends as well. Until next week, and next time, Valar.
Read us.